Hello, good morning, everybody. Thank you for attending. We greatly appreciate it. We've been looking forward to this all month. This is a comprehensive guide to ANSI ISEA Z358.1 and dash 2014 and emergency shower and Eyewash compliance. Today I'm going to cover a lot of information. I'm going to be sure to cover the standard, also how to test for the standard. I want to thank all of you who submitted questions ahead of time in advance. We're going to get to a lot of those at the end of the webinar here, and also follow up with questions to all of them in an Excel spreadsheet that you guys can share. But thank you for attending. If you've attended before, you know what you're in for. If not, thank you for being a first-time attendee to one of our webinars here at Haas. So to get started, we have a quick little slide just to remind everybody that this is for educational purposes only. The presentation is not meant to be distributed widely, and rather to be used for educational purposes only. However, we will share a PDF version with you and lots of great materials post-webinar, including an ANSI standard checklist that covers everything and a whole bunch of other great materials, the recording on demand through our YouTube and things like that, so you can share that out and spread this knowledge further. Please be sure to ask questions at any time. There are no stupid questions, there are no silly questions. Whatever comes to mind, if you're curious, that's why I'm here, is to explain and to help answer those questions. So just use the Q&A section in the bar there, the chat section, and we'll be sure to get all of your questions answered either at the end of the webinar or again in that post-webinar follow-up document. So this webinar is going to be recorded, available on demand, and it'll be sent to you in that follow-up email within 24 to 48 hours after the presentation. Really comes down to how many questions you guys really have, and I'll be sure to hop on that, get started right after the webinar, start answering questions. Some of them are a little more complicated, but I want to make sure I'm as thorough as possible, and it gives our marketing team time to put together the follow-up materials. There will be poll questions launched throughout the presentation. There's only 5 of them. They're pretty short. My buddy Hayden, who's on the webinar, is going to cover those today. And your participation is very much appreciated. There's also a follow-up survey after the webinar that will give you a $5 Starbucks gift card for your participation. So just as a thank you, you can have coffee on us for participating. So thank you ahead of time. My name is Justin Dunn. I am the sales product specialist and trainer for Haas. Also with me, running things in the background, are 2 members from our marketing team, Hayden Delgado, who is going to handle all of our poll questions and some materials after we're done with the core presentation, and Nicole Dennison, our marketing manager, who's making sure everything is going smoothly behind the scenes here. To get started, today's topics are the ANSI ISEA Z358.1 standard, the current version, the significant requirements of that standard and how to test for those. Some of them are very simple, some of them are a little more complex, but I'll be sure to explain in full how to test for everything. Best practices for emergency equipment, and then we'll do a Q&A and get you some additional information on how to interact with us as a company at the end of the webinar. So let's get started. Who is OSHA? That's how we start every single one of these. That's you have to know where it is that we're stemming from and why this information is so important, right? And if you're not familiar with OSHA, they are the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. Every almost every country in the world has their own version of OSHA. You know, Canada, India, everywhere has their own version. Ours is OSHA, and they're the agency responsible for regulating emergency shower and eye wash facilities. You've probably had a visit, which is a good thing, right? Because they're there to help us. They're there to spot things that we may not be thinking about and improve our health and safety culture. But OSHA's standard for emergency shower and eye wash facilities is 29 CFR 1910.151C. And unfortunately, it's very vague. It doesn't give us a lot of information. It's called the medical services and first aid section. And all it tells us is where the eyes or body of any person may be exposed to injurious corrosive materials, suitable facilities for quick drenching or flushing of the eyes and body shall be provided within the work area for immediate emergency use. This doesn't tell us in any way, shape, or form how to accomplish this, right? It doesn't tell us where the equipment needs to be, how it needs to function, how much water I need coming out of this thing, what the spray pattern should be, etc. So, and that's where the ANSI standard comes into play, okay? Now, the ANSI, remember that the ANSI ISEA standard is the primary source for compliance with 29 CFR 1910.151C, okay? And that's found on their website. You can talk to OSHA officials and they'll tell you exactly that. So the importance of going over the importance of compliance and the primary reason we want so much focus on the Z358.1 standard is prevention of injuries and fatalities in your workplace. This will help to lower your general workplace risk, right? And overall, we're focused on lost time and money for both the employee and the employer, right? It's expensive to have an accident at work for both of you. You know, personally, professionally, we want to make sure that you get back to work as quickly as possible and that your employer has their employee in place doing their job as quickly as possible. And having the correct emergency equipment in place, functioning correctly, helps to accomplish all of that. Now, OSHA continually steps up enforcement, particularly for employers who have a history of serious or repeated violations. If you fall into that list, obviously you're going to get a little bit more attention from OSHA, lucky you. On August 1st, 2016, OSHA fines increased for the first time since 1990. It was by a dramatic percentage, by 80%, which is huge. That's wildly more than what it was previously, and that was due to never having accounted for inflation. Now, effective January 2nd, 2018, OSHA fines are increasing by 2% to adjust for that inflation. This is just a general map of fines throughout the US. I'm actually probably going to work on finding a few more examples this year. But many of these are from 2019, 18, 17. But I try to find names and violations that really are good examples too, right? So you can see kind of the elephant in the room up on the top right, Transaxle LLC in New Jersey. Their violation was failure to provide adequate eye washes or employees exposed to hazardous substances. They likely just didn't have emergency equipment in place, and it's probably very likely that this wasn't their first offense. Hence the hefty fine there, almost $400,000. And when you think about the cost of emergency equipment, putting it in place, suffering a fine like that isn't easy for a lot of companies. That'll close the door in some places. So investing a couple $1,000s in an emergency shower, getting it plumbed, getting it in place can help to prevent these numbers that you see here, which can be pretty scary. Over on the left-hand side, almost $200,000. This is in Coos Bay, Oregon. This is in 2017. This is Bay Area Athletic Club. And this was basically employees working around a pool, and they didn't have an eye wash or shower station. And as you know, some of the chemicals they use to maintain that pool can be pretty hazardous. So simply having had emergency equipment in place could have prevented this whole mess here. And $200,000, that's not an easy number to eat. So adherence to the ANSI standard and OSHA, and ensuring that we're providing the best emergency equipment and first aid for our employees, our friends, is going to help prevent all of this. So moving on, that'll be included obviously in the follow-up materials, so you can look through all of those in your free time. That's all public information, it's online. You can go grab it straight from OSHA, pending specific areas of their standards and that you want to find. So what is the ANSI ISEA Z358.1-2014 standard? It was actually written by the International Safety and Equipment Association. That's why the ISEA is in the title there. They don't always do that, put their own name in there, but very frequently ISEA is in the title of the standard somewhere if it was written there. ANSI is more like distribution, and rather than the ISEA writes it, ANSI distributes it. And what it does is defines emergency eyewash and shower design, location, temperature requirements for proper functionality and usage. Just remember again, OSHA references the ANSI standard as the primary source for guidance to comply with their own standard. The standard itself was first published in 1981. As you can see, it's been revised many times since 1981, the most recent in 2014. Some of the most important revisions in the two most recent, in 2009 and 2014, were temperature range for water delivery, simultaneous use, eyewash testing requirements, and then in 2014, design, manufacture, and installation of equipment, equipment installation location, and adjusted measurements, which a lot of those really help to define the equipment for the manufacturer and make sure that we were all kind of on the same page. Luckily, Haas is always kind of ahead of the curve on this. Actually, as a matter of fact, page 1 or 2, whatever, there are certain manufacturers that are on the board for this standard, and obviously they speak to us as leaders in this industry for guidance on updates and things like that, changes, etc. So Haas's name is right on there. And that leads us to poll question number 1. Again, we greatly appreciate everybody's participation. Hayden is going to present that poll question. Hayden, if you would, please.
Thank you, Justin. So our first poll question is, which best describes your role in choosing showers and eye face washes? If the question does not apply to you, please just ignore it. And the options are place the order, install or maintain the product, specify product and plans, decide or make recommendations, or I do not have a role.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so moving on, we're going to get right into the core of this. So what are the significant requirements and how to test for those requirements? What are the most common questions I get are, what are the differences between weekly testing and annual testing, right? I have found very frequently that weekly testing is something that many facilities are still not doing. And I think sometimes if they really understood just how simple of a test or the requirement is for that, that it would happen much more frequently. Now, there is a difference in weekly and annual testing for portable, self-contained equipment and plumbed equipment. I'll explain that difference here in a second. So here's the ANSI weekly minimum performance requirements for all equipment, is that the emergency equipment needs to be activated weekly, once a week. an employee. I like to, personally here at Haas, I was in charge of our inspections for a long time, quite, years ago. And I used to like to have employees in their specific areas empowered to do their own inspections, trained, ready, documenting their own inspections and things like that. And it saved a lot of time, right? You only had to check, one employee had to check one piece of equipment every week. And it was better than having one person go all over the place. But number two, activation needs to ensure the flow of water to the heads of the device, right? So if you have an Eyewash, it has to be turned on. If you have a shower, it needs to be turned on. And we just have to make sure that we have flow at the piece of equipment. Number three, the duration of the activation needs to ensure that all stagnant water is flushed from the unit. Okay, now if you're familiar with a dead leg, it's basically the section of piping between the endpoint and the supply. And sometimes that's really short, sometimes it's really long. If you have a recirculating loop of water, it's not such a big deal. You can activate it real quick, turn it off, and you're good to go. But we need to clear out that dead leg to help prevent growth, Legionella, things like that, nasty stuff getting into the pipes. I'll tell you right now, I've been on site where I've turned on showers and you get spaghetti noodles coming out of the shower. It's really, it's sorry for that visual. It's really gross and it's really nasty. I've seen every color of water come out of emergency equipment. It's because it's not being tested on a weekly basis. And eventually when somebody needs that, they're going to get a face full of dark brown, disgusting water. And we need to try to prevent that, right? Now, just as a heads up, if you ever do run into that and you're in an emergency, it's best to just use that nasty water, unfortunately. Treat what it is that you're currently going through and then deal with the aftermath of your new tetanus or et cetera after the fact. But generally speaking, you want nice, clear, clean, potable water coming out of these. Now with portable equipment, this changes, right? This changes pretty drastically. If we're pulling the equipment down, activating it on a weekly basis, that creates a maintenance ticket right away, right? We don't have 15 minutes of water in that piece of equipment anymore. And there's no dead leg to clear, right? And Haas has so many different ways. Oh, I have somebody at my door. I'm sure my wife will handle it. You guys are about to hear my dogs. But we have so many different ways to ensure that water stays growth-free inside of that tank, whether it's an additive or we have what we call cleansing sticks, and help to prevent any and all growth inside of that tank. They're pretty amazing and will help lower your maintenance ticket items too. But with that portable equipment, all you have to do is open the tank, ensure that there's enough water inside of the tank, and you are completely good to go. So obviously different than plumbed equipment, but you just have to ensure that you have 15 minutes of water in the tank, whether it's plumbed, gravity fed or pressurized portable. The annual inspection for both portable and plumbed equipment is everything that there is. You have to test it for all requirements. And it also has to be tested for a full 15 minutes, which is difficult to do in a lot of situations. Clean rooms, labs, things like that, you can't just dump, 200 to 300 gallons of water right on the floor, right? Depending on what type of equipment you have. And you need something to capture that or some way to funnel it to a nearby drain. So sometimes, unfortunately, you're gonna have to get creative with how this is done. But a full 15 minutes has to be accomplished to ensure that it can actually do it, right? So this is our checklist in the bottom right-hand corner. This will be sent out in the follow-up materials, but it's a great guide on how to accomplish exactly that, an annual inspection. So you're gonna have to cover all of the following. And what you're gonna need are the following tools. You're gonna need a tape measure. an Eyewash gauge. All manufacturers manufacture an Eyewash gauge, and that's because ANSI told us how to make it. They gave us the exact design on how to do this. Our model is the 9015. This, what you're seeing on the right here, is the 9011. This is a full ANSI testing kit. You'll need a 5-gallon bucket. You'll need a 2-gallon water line marked on the bucket, and I'll explain how that's used here coming up. You'll need a shower sock and pole. You definitely want one of those. I've had soggy socks at work way too many times. That thing's my best friend. Thermometer, and you need an ANSI Z358.1 checklist, which we're going to send you, and is also included in this kit. But I will explain how each of these is used coming up. So here we go. Requirement number 1, other than testing, it needs to be accessible within 10 seconds or 55 feet. They changed it to 55 feet to ensure that we had a measurable distance between hazard and emergency equipment. So number 1, just checks for the proximity to the hazard, right? We want to generally straight line to the piece of equipment without any obstructions in place, but do your best to measure that distance. Keep it under 55 feet. 10 seconds was hard to gauge for humans, right? We all move at a different pace. So I always suggest using 55 feet as the measurement. If you actually have the ANSI standard, check the appendix, the end. This was added after the fact because too many people had questions about measuring 10 seconds. Honestly, I don't know why it was even added. So second, needs to be located on the same level as the hazard, right? We don't need an obstacle course. We don't want to make this more difficult than it really needs to be. It needs to be on the same plane, the same level. Imagine having something in your eyes and now you need to navigate stairs, downstairs, upstairs, whatever, to find the piece of emergency equipment. So if there's a potential for exposure, it needs to be on the same level that you might have been exposed on the emergency equipment. So just confirm there's no changes in level on that. That one's easy. Needs to be free of obstructions. I just mentioned that. Ensure there are no obstructions. Look, emergency equipment, it's kind of weird, right? You've got to have it, but realistically, we don't ever want to actually use it for an emergency. And unfortunately, in a lot of facilities, in a lot of sites, it gets eventually neglected. People lose sight of it, and it's maintenance. And you get things like you see here on the right. Obstructions piled up around it, nobody's testing, nobody's making sure it's cleared out, and then eventually somebody needs it, and now they're burning time between being exposed and getting treated. And that can be the difference between saving your eyesight or getting back to work a lot sooner than you would have normally if they'd been compliant. So just ensure there are no tripping hazards or obstructions in the way. Needs to be well lit, needs to be identifiable with a highly visible signage. This one's easy. On the right, you can obviously see there's no signage here, nothing identifying this piece of equipment. Lots of different types of signage out there. We offer, your basic placard sign goes on there, 8x11, but also 3-sided signage and etc. There's lots of different ways to draw lots of attention to this piece of equipment very quickly, and I think it's obvious why that needs to be done, right? It needs to be as highly visible as possible so it can be identified quickly. It also needs to deliver flushing fluid for a full 15 minutes, right? On an annual basis, just once a year, you have to run the piece of equipment for a full 15 minutes, okay? Again, I know this is hard to do if it's outside, piece of cake. If it's near a drain, piece of cake. But usually a tank or some sort to capture that water is ideal. But it has to run for that full 15. The outlets need to be protected from airborne contaminants. You just have to have your dust covers in place. Unfortunately, employees frequently leave these out of place They forget to replace them after testing, or heck, I caught, I won't tell you where, but I caught an employee at a site using one as a drinking fountain. And I was like, number one, ew. And number two, we didn't have dust covers on at anywhere in this facility. And we talked to the gentleman and he was like, well, you know, nothing's like getting in there. It's not collecting in there. It's not a big deal. And it is. It depends on your facility, what your manufacturing process is, or whatever. But we've seen them clogged with, you know, plastic, with cement dust, with dirt, with all kinds of different things. We don't want that blowing up into the user's face or preventing it from working correctly, right? Also, the dust covers need to be self-removing. You have to have dust covers that once activated, remove themselves, right? We don't need extra steps for the user. I turn it on, it activates, the dust cover removes itself. And all manufacturers do their best to accomplish this. Some of us do it a lot better than others. And what you need to watch out for is a usually low flow, low supply issues. You're not providing enough water, the bare ANSI minimum, which I'll cover in a little bit, and it doesn't pop that cover off automatically. And that creates an extra step, more time before they get treated, and we don't want that. This is my buddy McDean in the video here. He's out on our production floor. And what he's just demonstrated is that the equipment needs to go from off to on in 1 second or less. And it has to remain on without the use of the operator's hands. Okay, there is a misconception out there that it's a requirement that it has to go off to on in one motion, but it's under 1 second, right? We're worried about time from activation to treatment. And we want that to be as instantaneous as possible. To test this, just evaluate the activation. Ensure you have water in 1 second or less at the heads of the device. Just to stress how important this is, you're going to have other emergencies to deal with. You need to be able to hold your eyes open like you see McDean doing here. You need to be able to remove your clothing. You need to be able to deal with a lot of other things going on. And you don't want to have to worry about keeping the equipment on. Now, what used to be very popular were self-closing valves, and they're still in place out there. I still catch them. I run a survey program that Hayden is going to talk about later, and we find these valves still in place. And again, they used to be very popular, but you'd have to hold the valve open. And you know, I can pat my head and rub my belly at the same time, but I can't hold a shower open, hold an eye face wash open, remove my clothing, and hold my eyes open all at the same time, right? We want you to be able to deal with other emergencies. So they have to stay on indefinitely for the equipment. Now, the minimum flow rates for each of these types of equipment are as follows. Eyewashes, 0.4 gallons per minute, 1.5 liters for my buddies up north. Eye face washes, 3 gallons per minute or 11.4 liters. Drench showers, 20 gallons per minute or 75.7 liters per minute. Obviously, if you have a combination of these types of equipment, you have to combine those gallons, right? So if you had an eye face wash and drench shower combination unit, you're looking at 23 gallons per minute. It's a lot of water. Minimum 1.25 inch piping, just so you know. Now, the equipment has to provide a controlled flow of flushing fluid at a velocity that's low enough to be non-injurious to the user, right? So we actually had somebody submit a question. I'm going to cover it afterwards too, but you get what's called, and I'll show you here in a second, but I call them brainwashers, really injurious, intense flow rates coming out of emergency equipment. And all that's going to do is do more damage. And it's going to deter the victim from being able to use this equipment. They're going to be unable to keep their face in this or stand under the drench shower. Imagine, you know, ANSI requires 20 GPM for a shower. Now at Haws, we include flow controls in all of our equipment. We really try to use the water as intelligently as possible. But if you're pumping out 30 to 40 gallons per minute on top of a victim that's suffering from acid burns, from something that's affecting their skin, that is going to be hard to take. That's going to hurt badly. So a gentle flow, something that's distributing the water evenly, like you see here in the photo, is really ideal. Think about victim comfort, right? You can confirm this by ensuring that the flow rate for the shower and the eye wash or the eye face wash and pattern requirements are completely met. And I'll explain how to do that further. Here you go. So on the left, too much flow. This is injurious. This is going to hurt. No, under the best circumstances, nobody's going to want to put their face in that. That's going to be awful. You're going to do damage to the soft tissue of your eyes. On the right, you have a very dangerous situation that we uncover very frequently during surveys. It's called simultaneous flow. This one in particular, it's just a low flow. This isn't going to rinse both of your eyes at the same time. And all of a sudden you have to pick your favorite eye and you know which one an eye patch is going to look best over. This isn't a good situation to be in. We have to check this and we have to prevent this. So minimum for eye wash 0.4, minimum for eye face wash 3 gallons. The way that we check this is by using the eye wash gauge. Okay, let me explain. So this is the eye wash gauge. Again, you saw this a little bit earlier in model 9015. That's the drawing from the ANSI standard, showed us exactly how to make this. Now what this does is allow us to check the flow rate from the eye wash or the eye face wash and compare it to average human eye spacing, right? We've all got the 2 eyes and they're generally in the same place, and that's what this gauge allows us to check. Now, if the flow rate is meeting the eye wash gauge in between the 2 circles there where our eyes should be, it's considered usable, right? So here's the requirement. Flushing fluid shall cover the areas between the interior and exterior of a gauge at some point less than 8 inches above the eye wash nozzle. Let me show you how that's worked. So I've got 2 videos. They really clearly demonstrate how this is done. So you can see I'm starting at 8 inches, slowly lowering the gauge, and at any point under 8 inches, all the way down to 0, because there's some weird equipment out there. There's one I like to call the Eyewash, competitor's model, older, that flows straight across, and you have to use the eye wash gauge at almost 0 inches to ensure that it's actually compliant. Now use the tape measure, measure up 8 inches, put the gauge there, slowly lower it. Now what you're trying to accomplish is this. This is the overhead view. Watch the 2 eye streams in the middle. It's meeting the eye circles. This is going to meet a human being's eyes perfectly. It's usable. And by doing this, we're ensuring this is getting the correct GPM per minute. Okay, anywhere under 8 inches, and it's perfectly compliant. Now, the flushing fluid, the flow pattern, has to be between 33 to 53 inches above the surface floor that the user is standing on. Now, what this is accomplishing is, again, just making sure that average human measurements, anthropometrics, are being met, right? So it's making sure that the top of the eye wash stream is not too low and it's not too tall, and we're going to be able to lean over, hold our eyes open, be in a fairly comfortable position, and utilize the piece of equipment. Okay, previously it was 45 inches to the head of the device. We don't measure to the head of the device, we measure to the top of the water streams. And that's also helping us to prevent injurious flow rates and be able to call those non-compliant. So you also have to keep a minimum distance of the streams 6 inches from any obstruction, which is just to make sure that you're not going to hit your head on anything when you use it. The flow pattern, again, 33 to 53 inches from the floor. Just use a tape measure, measure up to the top of the stream. That's where we want that measurement to be, what we want to find out. And use 6 inches, measure from the very center of the head of the device around it. and ensure that there are no obstructions. We don't want to further injure the person. And if you're thinking about going to use one of these, you're going to be in a panic. I would be in a panic. I want to keep my eyesight, and I'm going to go use this. I'm going to put my face into this. I don't want to hit my nose, my forehead, anything else on an obstruction, or not be able to use it correctly. The ANSI flow rate for the shower head, again, 20 GPM. There's your combinations: shower and eye wash, shower and eye face wash, 20.4 GPM, 23 GPM, respectively. On the right, really good example of what happens when you just don't have enough water supplied to your shower, or when you have a shower head that uses the bell for the spray pattern. You get what's called the donut effect. And unfortunately, that's Justin Dunn keyword, donut effect. That's my patented, trademarked patent. But it's essentially what's happening is there's a device in there and it's spreading the water out, it's hitting the bell, and it's going to surround you with water. Now, this isn't part of the standard, but it is something you need to watch out for. It creates a dangerous situation in that the water's not focused down on your body. So be sure to watch out for that. And in low flow situations, you're going to get this really erratic spray pattern that's not going to help anybody. So the flow rates, here's how you test the flow rate for the shower. Okay, again, the equipment, 5-gallon bucket, 2-gallon water line marked, shower sock and pole, thermometer. Place the thermometer into the bucket, step 1. That'll come in later. We want to know the temperature of that water, right? If you're not testing a shower, you want to know the temperature of the eye wash or the eye face wash, and there is no shower. Just place the thermometer into the flow of the eye wash, and that's how you can test it. I would also caution you from using laser temperature devices. Make sure that you're aiming it at something that's directly in the pattern, not through the water at like the wall or something. It'll really mess with your outcome. Place the shower sock around the shower head firmly. You're dealing with 20 to 30 GPM that's going to come out of that thing. It'll surprise you the first time. And make sure it's tucked into the bucket. Activate the eye wash or the eye face wash if one is present. We want that running while we're testing the shower, right? Because ultimately simultaneous use is what we're trying to accomplish. Activate the shower for 6 seconds and then check that the 2-gallon water level is marked, mark is met on the bucket. It's just like checking your pulse, right? The nurse doesn't take, count for a full 60 seconds. And that's what we're doing here. So 6 seconds, 2 gallons equals our 20 GPM over a full minute. Shower flow pattern, very easy to check. You can see a good flow pattern on the left, compliant at least. It is using the shower bell, so there's probably less water in the middle there. And on the right, you have a low flow issue. Now what we want to accomplish is measure 20 inches wide at 60 inches above the floor. This is just average human shoulder spacing. So generally speaking, if you're under the shower, your whole body is going to be covered. Also measure 16 inches from the center of the column of water for any obstructions. Nothing can be in that area that would obstruct the water pattern or you from standing directly in that water. Here's a great example. This is Bill, another one of my coworkers, a buddy of mine. He's measuring 20 inches wide, 60 inches above the floor. We're just ensuring that, again, it's covering you shoulder to shoulder. Piece of cake. Now the shower head has to be 82 to 96 inches. If it's too low, the spray pattern could be too narrow. If it's too high, it could be too wide. It's not going to rinse you correctly. Just take your tape measure, measure to the outlet of the water, not to the bell of the shower, to the outlet, wherever the water is coming out. That has to be 82 to 96 inches. The pull rod cannot exceed 69 inches from the surface floor, just to ensure that the shorter amongst us are capable of reaching the pull rod, right? If you're really tall, you can reach it at any height, pull it, but we want to make sure it's not out of reach for anybody. Just take your tape measure, measure to the bottom of the pull rod, the handle, and you're good to go. You can check that compliance easily. Combination unit components need to be capable of operating simultaneously and need to be positioned so that the components can be used by the same user at the same time. I say this every time, but for some reason, Plumbers they throw away the instructions like step one. Not all of them, but I'm guilty of that too. I just built a crib. I'm having a baby, and I'm not having a baby. My wife's having a baby. I'm taking all the credit. But I threw away the instructions, and you have to follow the manufacturer's instruction guidelines, especially for something as important as this, or a crib. And they think that the shower is for one emergency, the eye face wash is for another emergency, and that's not the case. These have to be used by the same person at the same time. It's incredibly important, okay? Just make sure they're correctly aligned, one over the other, and that's very easy to use or to check, okay? But also, what we discover, and is one of the most dangerous facets of compliance with combination units, is starvation. So there's no flow controls we find in lots of different emergency equipment types and brands. And what happens is the shower will starve the eye wash or the eye face wash when you have them activated simultaneously. It takes the path of least resistance through the shower. There's nothing restricting the water there, and it steals all the water from the bottom. So to prevent this, we can always retrofit it, get flow controls in place, and it'll help to correct that almost immediately. So be cautious, watch out for simultaneous use issues. Now, if shutoff valves are installed in the supply line, provisions have to be made to prevent unauthorized shutoff, right? Think of like you see here in the photo, lockout, tagout devices. They're not just for keeping things from working. They're also keeping for use for locking open valves that need to be locked open and prevent shutting off. So trace your supply line back, make sure the valve is open, and lock it open. So we can't just have employees walking by and shutting them off. That would create a very dangerous situation, right? Has to deliver tepid flushing fluid, 60 degrees Fahrenheit to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, or 16 degrees Celsius to 38 degrees Celsius. Okay, 75% of ophthalmologists cite that it's incredibly important, and it keeps the victim in the piece of equipment and being treated for the full 15 minutes. If you got to be in there for 15 minutes, that's like the bare minimum. There are hazards out there that require a lot more, but they're usually pretty extreme, like highly corrosive stuff that you have to be in for 30 minutes. The highest I've ever seen was 45 minutes, I think, or maybe it was an hour, but they get pretty extreme sometimes. And that's just making sure that it's all off of you. So when first responders get there, there's zero likelihood that you're going to continue to suffer from that hazard on the way to the hospital or expose them to whatever it is that you were exposed to, right? So the temperature of the water, very important. This can be, the testing is conducted during the flow rate for the shower head, or again, just stick it in the eye face wash like you see here to get a good temperature read. Now, employees, I call this the duh clause. This is obviously important. I don't think anybody would miss a beat on this. This is important. If you have the potential to be exposed to hazardous materials, you need to be instructed in the location and the proper use of the emergency showers. There are very few manufacturers of emergency equipment who have strayed away from your typical pull rod and push flag, but they exist. So, and there's some weird ones out there in the world, but in the US, I've only found like a handful of them. Just make sure that that your employee is trained on how to use that particular piece of equipment, so there's no guessing when they get there. Piece of cake. Make sure that you're checking for the need for freeze protection, where the possibility of freezing conditions exist. You need to have a unit that is protected from freezing or freeze protected. Make sure you're checking your local weather patterns. You know the area where you live, when you can expect potential freezing during the year, and ensure that you're protected from it. On the right, this is the 8315 CTFP. Is an excellent example of freeze protection that's heat traced to prevent the pipes internally from freezing. Very typically, the supply line connecting to it is also connected to heat trace, preventing it from freezing in an outdoor situation. Appendix B5 of the ANSI standard. This notes that a single step up into an enclosure where the equipment can be accessed is not considered to be an obstruction. They had to add this in the appendix after the fact. I told you earlier, you can't have any change in level. It's not allowed, right? This is the single exception to that, and it's because of equipment like you see here on the right. This is our ePod. This is the 8710. Big, awesome piece of equipment. We're actually going to cover it here just really quickly in a couple minutes. But you can't make equipment like this flush with the ground. This is a protected environment. It's heated. It's for extreme climate conditions. And we have to make this a sealed environment, right? So doors are allowed, and a single step is allowed into this enclosure because it just can't be made flush with the ground. So if it's an enclosed device or in a booth, you can have a single step. I hope that's clear. Also in Appendix B5, a door does not constitute an obstruction if it meets the following requirements. Otherwise, you cannot have a door in place. The door has to be non-locking. The doors have to open in the direction of the emergency equipment. The hazard has to be non-corrosive, and they have to be push bar or panic bar operated, right? You have to be able to hit it. I call them crash bars. You crash into it, open the door, and run to the piece of emergency equipment, right? So if there are doors between the hazard and the unit, just make sure that we have this in, that the doors are meeting these minimums. Now, Hayden, if you would explain poll question number 2, please.
Poll question number 2 is, what are you likely to do after today's webinar? Please check all that apply, and once again, do not answer the question if it does not apply to you. We'll give everybody a second to go ahead and answer the poll question, and thank you all for the participation today.
Okay, thank you, everybody. A couple recommended best practices real quick before we move on. Ensure that there's adequate space for emergency responders at the site, right? We don't want it too cramped of the emergency equipment. Locate other first aid equipment near emergency eye washes and showers. It just makes sense. You know, if there's an emergency, everything's right there. And train employees on how to access and activate the equipment during an emergency. Piece of cake. This is actually ANSI Z358, and it's color coding, correct color coding. Green is the safety, safety, location of all safety equipment, which is why HAWS is color coded in green. We want it very clear that this is emergency first aid equipment, and that it draws the eye correctly, and that you're headed towards safety. Remember the correct equipment for the hazard, and that you're providing the correct equipment. Eye washes are for your basic wood shavings, dust, airborne particulates. Eye face washes are for minor incidents affecting only the eyes and face, but also everything an eye wash covers. The drench shower is for PPE decontamination. You can't treat your eyes, your face. You would never look up into a drench shower, or at least I hope you wouldn't. That would hurt. And then a combination unit, chemical exposure of the eyes, face, and body. Everything, basically. That's the catch-all right there. If you're not sure what to provide, slap a combination unit in place and you'd be good to go. ANSI tepid water range, make sure you're providing beyond tepid water. Remember that water that's too hot or too cold can drive the injured user out of the emergency equipment way too soon. If it's too cold, you're risking cold shock, cardiac arrest. They may not remove their clothing, which is really important. If it's too hot, I mean, your average residential shower is about 105 degrees Fahrenheit. That's about where mine is at. Legionella, unfortunately, thrives between 95 and 115 degrees Fahrenheit, which overlaps the ANSI standard. So we always suggest 80 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit is really an ideal range for emergency equipment. Just to talk to you real quick, as we're going through this, this is the EPOD, I mentioned it earlier. This is our advanced tepid water solutions, and just an unequaled piece of equipment. I'm really impressed with what we've done with this. It's rugged, it's highly visible, it's corrosion resistant, it has an all metal construction, high density insulated walls in here. These are for extreme weather conditions and environments. You can see some of the other options here, but this would be the booth option. Outdoor, some of these can supply other pieces of emergency equipment as well, and are designed to do such, but they provide a heated, comfortable environment for the victim inside, therefore all applications, any situation. And they're supported with a comprehensive offering of features and services. We can also do custom options for you, and our services is unmatched in emergency equipment. And it's got such an amazing new look. It has our new safe site on the doors. Those are actually highlighted green LED doors, so that there is no question for the victim as to where the entrance is or how to locate it. They can easily see it. It's really an amazing piece of technology. But I wanted to show those off for you real quick. Hayden, if you would poll question number 3.
Thank you. This poll question is, would you be interested in learning more about the HAWS integrated EPOD? Once again, we'll give everyone a few seconds before we move on.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Last of the additional best practices before we move on. Remove contacts. Don't rub your eyes, right? You're gonna make it so much worse, and your contacts can trap contaminants. Disrobe completely, including your socks and shoes. It's not time to get shy. If you need to use a piece of emergency equipment, you gotta be in your birthday suit. This is to make sure that no contaminants are getting trapped between your clothes and continuing to cause you harm. With that in mind, provide privacy curtains. This is going to be one of the worst times of your life if you have to go through this in a real emergency, and it's ideal that we give our coworkers some privacy while they go through this. Bump test before high-risk tasks. If you're doing something particularly dangerous, just go check that the emergency equipment is on real quick. That doesn't take any time at all. It's a piece of cake. Turn it off, on, it's working. Let's go do this highly dangerous thing. Be cautious while assisting. Oh, that worked really good. It was just like, gave all of them away all of a sudden. Be cautious while assisting to not contaminate yourself. Give them verbal cues if you're assisting a coworker on how to get there. Ensure the correct type of signage. You don't want an Eyewash sign where there's a combination unit, or combination unit where there's an Eyewash. We don't want to give the wrong expectations. And be cautious of, this seems like a no-brainer, but be cautious of proximity to electrical components, outlets. I have so many photos, it would blow your mind. But there's, be cautious, right? This is pumping out a lot of water. We don't want to add electrical shock to that as well. Now that's it for the additional best practices. My buddy Hayden is going to cover a couple of topics real quick, and then we're going to just cover a bunch of Q&A questions. So here we go, Hayden, if you would.
This is our ANSI Emergency Shower and Eyewash Survey program. We have this program set up to offer insight into your own facility's compliance. And we're going to do that through a free full day inspection. And we have representatives all across the US and Canada who are trained in the ANSI standard, as well as how to test for the ANSI standard and its requirements. That free full day inspection includes an inspection report, which is going to be a download of every piece of emergency equipment that was tested at your facility, as well as how it measures up against the ANSI standard. And then there's a executive summary, which is similar to the chart here on the right side, which is going to break down the compliant versus non-compliant products at your facility and the non-compliant levels as well. And then we'll move on to a debriefing meeting or a web conference for now, where we can sit down with you and have a real discussion about our findings and the recommendations we have for you and the best ways to move forward and make any fixes that need to be made. There are a few restrictions that apply to this. It's not many, but they mainly have to deal with distance and how many days it may take for us to be on site realistically. And please visit our website using the link below at the bottom left of the slide. Fill out that survey form, and by filling that survey form out, you'll be able to get directly in contact with me and Justin, and then we can have discussions on how to move forward.
With that, Hayden, if you would run poll question number 4.
Poll question number 4, would you be interested in a free site survey of your existing emergency equipment for ANSI compliance? Then we'll move on to HAWS services. HAWS services is a service that we provide that it really differentiates us from the rest of the market. We're the only manufacturer that provides a warranty and field service for emergency shower and eyewash products like this. We often find that the issue is not knowing how to test for ANSI Z358.1, and not to test for this could lead to fines for non-compliance or injury of an employee, among all the other different options that Justin's ran through so far. And this program is set up to help you achieve that ANSI compliance in any environment and help remove potential pain points that you may have in your facility. We do provide this service regardless of what brand you have installed at your facility as well. At the bottom of the slide, you'll see what exactly is provided with HAWS services. It's that insurance that your equipment will be tested weekly and annually, preventative maintenance or contracts, repairs and upgrades, startup and commissioning, online competent person training and certification, and a warranty service. Overall, HAWS services is really a great way for us to complement the superior products we're providing you with the best possible service that we can provide you with year-round. Thank you, Justin. I think we're getting move on. Poll question number 5. Would you be interested in learning more about how HAWS services can help you achieve ANSI compliance? And just once again, I'd like to thank everybody for participating in the poll questions today. It's been a huge help.
Yeah, these really help us to continue to improve this product, improve ways that we can help you towards compliance and be a source for guidance and compliance and product that helps to meet your needs in your industry. So thank you. Okay, on to the Q&A. Thank you, everybody. That's the core of it, and the infomercials for HAWS. I usually, I even have a FAQ, but you guys are, I always add it because I think like, oh, well, what if there's not many questions? And there's always an absolute ton of questions. So while we're doing that, I'll include answers to these in the follow-up document, but since we got so many questions, I'm just going to move straight on to the questions, and I'll include these again in the follow-up. Here's our contact information, and while that's on the screen, Hayden, if you would start with our questions.
Yeah, so I'll start with the question that you alluded to earlier. What do you do when the eyewash stations are over pressure, such as when they shoot too high?
Okay, so there's a couple things you can do here. Haws, we can make it really easy for you. Now, if you have injurious flow coming from the equipment and it's shooting way too high, potential hazard again for the victim, what you can do is simply retrofit it. We have a variety of retrofit kits that can easily retrofit onto either old Haws units or almost in all of our competitors' units, almost. We can retrofit about 80-ish% of the equipment that's out there right now. And you simply spin off the old head, spin on the new head, our Axion medically superior response products, and it will, the flow controls that are included in both the shower head and the eye face wash will help to immediately correct a ton of issues, not just injurious flow. An injurious flow, our product would be an AX13. It's just the eye face wash head. You slap it on there and it will bring that flow right back down to a what we call a zero velocity eye face wash, and basically gives a nice gentle flush for the victim. So pretty amazing technology. It'll correct things like simultaneous flow, injurious, uneven flow rates from the eye washes, like one end gets clogged up, etc. It's pretty amazing.
Our next question is, what determines the use of an eyewash station only or an eyewash shower combination?
This is determined by the safety data sheets for the particular hazard or substance that you're dealing with on site. So check the first aid section. If it says to rinse your eyes for 15 minutes, you need an eye wash or an eye face wash, ideally an eye face wash. That's just industry standard nowadays. And if it says to rinse your skin, then you're going to need a shower. And obviously, if it says both of those things, which is very common, if it says to rinse your eyes, that's common. If it says to rinse your skin, it usually says to rinse your eyes too, and that's a combination unit. So just check your SDS sheets, check that first aid section. It will guide you as to what type of equipment that you need.
Third question, how do you provide tempered water for portable eye wash or shower stations?
For portable equipment, there's a lot of situations where you have like a remote building or a site that you just can't plumb water to. And sometimes those are outside. And if you need to freeze protect it, options are growing rapidly nowadays. And Haws, what we would do is we have jackets for our equipment that you could retrofit onto, say, our portable 7501 unit, or our floor-mounted pressurized, I call it the keg tank eye wash, and it's heat traced, just like the 8315 that I showed off earlier. It's heat traced. You can either plug it into the wall, or we have options where you can plumb direct power to it in 120 or 220 volts and keep that device from freezing year round. So both are awesome options, and they're good down to like negative 30 degrees Fahrenheit. They're pretty amazing pieces of equipment.
Is there a specific weekly inspection document that can be used to audit eyewash stations?
We'll include that in the follow-up materials. We have a ANSI checklist that we're going to send you in the follow-up materials. Share it, send it anywhere, copy it, utilize it on a daily basis, whatever it is that you want to do. But it will outline everything that's required in a weekly test and everything that's required in an annual test. Actually, Nicole and I helped to put it together and revise it just last year. And it's a pretty, not pretty, very useful document, I promise you, and it'll be included.
And then final one, what guidance can you give for locations that cannot have plumbed eye washers?
For locations that can't have plumbed eye washes, portable equipment, self-contained equipment is ideal in these situations. There's always areas where it's just not ideal to have plumbed equipment, or it's too expensive to plumb water all the way out to the middle of nowhere, or a facility that you have, storage facility, etc. And portable equipment or self-contained equipment comes in both Eyewash or an overhead tank, a large overhead tank. Actually, I think I previewed one a little bit. It was a photo of it was on the ePod page earlier, and it's an overhead tank. It supplies a full 15-minute flush. It's a combination unit, and we even have the ability to say with our 9084 and 9083 cleansing sticks to maintain the water inside of those tanks for 3 years, keep it clean with just annual maintenance. So a lot of people are, divided and unsure of that type of equipment because of the amount of maintenance it takes. And it really, I assure you, it doesn't. You got to fill it up, drop the stick in, you're good to go for 3 years and you just got to empty it once a year. But stuff like that can make supplying areas where it's not ideal to have plumbed equipment really simple, really easy, and much simpler than you would think. And then Hayden, you said that's the last question. Nicole, is there anything else we need to cover?
No, so I will say that I have received so much feedback on this webinar, so thank you all for your engagement. I have tried to stay on top of all of your questions and responding as much as I can. Admittedly, I haven't been able to touch on everybody's questions. However, just know that what we will do is we'll send these questions to Justin. He'll be able to provide more thorough answers than I was able to provide, and we'll send these out in our follow-up materials. So again, thanks so much for all of your questions. You guys, this was so well, it sounds like the information was really well received, and there's a lot of great questions and comments back and forth, so thank you. But again, look for this in the follow-up materials. I think I'm going to go ahead and just end the webinar right now because there's just too much to go through. But again, be on the lookout in the next couple of days for this content.
That's great, and thank you everybody for your feedback. That's really means a lot to us. I'm glad you enjoyed the webinar. That's my contact information right there. If you need anything, reach out to me. Our Haas customer service team is unmatched in our industry. They're amazing, highly knowledgeable. Our website is just a huge and really easy to use source for information on our product, but also ways to reach out to us. We even have a live chat feature on the website. You can ask questions directly to our customer service team about product, compliance, whatever it is that you need. So we're here to help. I hope you take all this information you learned today, go forth and be champions for compliance and provide a safe and healthy environment for your employees. I hope everybody had a great time. Thank you for attending, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.